order at 1 p.m. Jody?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was preoccupied. Let me get my speaking notes. Please note that council meetings are streamed live and recorded on YouTube. Attendees acknowledge that in accordance with Section 17(2)(g) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, names, addresses, and other details provided when speaking at a council meeting will be publicly shared. Should you have any questions related to the collection or disclosure of personal information, please contact the Legislative and Advisory Services Division for the Town of High River by sending an email to foip@highriver.ca. That is FOIP@highriver.ca.
Thanks, Jody. I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that the Committee of the Whole adopt the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting November 12th as presented.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. You have my motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Previous minute adoption. Ask for a motion from Councillor Walsh that the Committee of the Whole adopt the minutes from the October 28th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented.
You have my motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Two delegations today. The first one, Mr. David Thomas is here from Crow's Nest Headwaters to give us his presentation on what's happening down there with the coal mining debacle. Just give us 2 seconds, David. We got to get a microphone over there for you.
Sorry. Again, thank you very much for this time. Can you hear me now?
Got
okay.
You now, yeah.
I represent Crow's Nest Headwaters, which is a citizens organization in Crow's Nest Pass that was formed to protect the watershed, and eventually we hope to remediate much of the damage that's been done to it. We're presenting today at 3 different councils, MD Ranchland, MD Pincher Creek, and here. You got the C team, I'm sorry. But the important issue facing us right now is a referendum that was called by the Municipal Council. The vote is on November 25th, and the question is, do you support Council's initiatives to support Northback Holdings in its attempt to reopen the Grassy Mountain coal mine? So first of all, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the Crow's Nest Pass citizens who value friendship with our downstream and eastern slope neighbors for the selfish decision by our municipal council to conduct a referendum intended to endorse Northback's attempts to mine coal at Grassy Mountain. Nowhere in the Alberta Municipal Government Act is a municipality empowered to override or veto the powers or jurisdiction of its neighbors. Thus, a municipal referendum cannot have force, influence, or consequence insofar as the result could affect other Alberta municipalities, such as downstream communities in the case of any project that could affect water quality or quantity. Nor should the Alberta government treat the result of a single municipality's resolution, bylaw, or referendum as a mandate to affect actions that would impact other municipalities. A municipal referendum has no force or consequence with respect to an initiative geographically located in another municipality. We respectfully suggest that Council adopt a resolution defending your powers and prerogatives and to communicate this resolution to the Government of Alberta. Now, the background to this is that the Premier of Alberta stated several times during the 2022 election campaign that she would support any community that voted in favor of a mine development, and this was clearly targeted at Crow's Nest Pass. The council has called a referendum for November 25th, seeking public support for its existing support for Northback and the mine. The referendum's a hoax. And the reason I say that is the council has already done everything that it can to advance the interests of Northback and the coal mine. And specifically that is by signing a contract with Northback in 2021. This is after the mine was first rejected by the Alberta Energy Regulator. The contract gives Northback an option good to the end of 2028 to all of the water license that is called the York Creek Water License. And that's a municipal water license that provided drinking water until the 80s when it was replaced by wells. So this is real water. It's flowing through the system right now. And if Northback exercises its option to seize the water, that water will no longer flow through the system. It will no longer go downstream to the Old Man Reservoir. We think that this is an outrageous abuse of a municipal power, and we believe that it challenges the integrity of other municipalities downstream and on the eastern slopes. It's an affront to our neighbors. It's something that embarrasses some of us. And we really would like to express our solidarity with you in defending your rights, and to ask you to ensure that the Premier does not take the result of one little municipality's referendum as a mandate to allow a major development in another municipality. The mine is in Ranchland. It's not in Crow's Nest Pass at all. So Crow's Nest Pass is asking the citizens of Crow's Nest Pass to vote in favor of a mine in MD Ranchland. That in itself is abuse. It's outrageous, and it needs to be called out. I'd like to just show you a little 2-minute video that we've developed for voters in Crow's Nest Pass, and it's about the key issue of the water license. Okay, so just to be clear here about what happened. When the Australian company first proposed a mine at Grassy Mountain, the municipal council supported the company and adopted a resolution in a public meeting in 2017 to give the company an option to the water of the York Creek license. And they prepared the documentation for the water transfer. First of all, the water license was not in good order, and they had to correct that. They did that. And when the Alberta Energy Regulator denied the mine, it expressly said at the same time that the water transfer application dies with the denial of the mine. So the agreement was null and void. It was finished. And that happened in June 17th, 2021. The information I'm about to give you comes from the results of a Freedom of Information petition that we presented the city, and which was responded to very professionally and very quickly by the Freedom of Information officer. In the course of the summer, following that denial by the Alberta Energy Regulator, Crow's Pass Council met 4 times in closed session to discuss the mine application, the denied mine application. Specifically, it was Riversdale Resources. And we have in the public minutes references to those 4 motions to go in camera. So we know that that was discussed 4 times in camera. That's not legal. The Alberta Municipal Government Act says specifically that no contentious issue and specifically no sensitive local issue should be discussed in closed session. The last of those meetings took place in August. In October, again, this is derived from the Freedom of Information petition. In October, the Chief Administrative Officer of the municipality signed a new contract with Northback. This one giving them the same conditions as the previous one. In fact, it was only a 1-paragraph contract, resurrecting the old contract and extending the option to the end of 2028. Now, because of the substantial nature of that, that's a new contract. We have legal advice on that. That contract was signed without any public resolution by the municipal council. If there was a resolution, it took place in secret, in private, which would make it illegal. The municipal government of Crow's Nest Pass has called this referendum to provide political cover for its illegal contract with Northback. It's plain and simple. There's nothing more than they can do than what they've already done, which is hand over the city's water. So we believe that what's going on up there is out and out corruption. It's a takeover of the municipal government by a foreign corporation. It's rules about in-camera meetings have been broken 4 times. The contract was signed without public resolution by the council. So we're taking on that fight in Crow's Nest Pass. That's our main argument against this referendum. We believe the referendum's illegitimate, but we don't have much choice but to fight it. We're going to try to win it, but it's not going to make it any more legitimate if we do. The next stage is to ensure that the provincial government does not take a positive result of that referendum as a mandate to impose a coal mine on the rest of Alberta, which is what it would be doing. That coal mine is not going to be, the effects of that coal mine are not restricted to MD ranch land. They're going to have impact on everybody downstream because the quality and the quantity of water flowing into the Old Man Reservoir will be directly affected. But it will also provide a very dangerous precedent in that a decision in one municipality can impact other municipalities without their participation or cooperation. It would be like somebody coming to you now and saying, I want to build a guest house on my neighbor's backyard. My neighbor doesn't want me to do that, but I want you to give me the power to do it anyway. So we think that you need to protect your rights. We know that there are a whole bunch of Australian coal miners all lined up along the spine of the Rockies, and they're just ready to pounce. If Grassy Mountain gets approved, the government will feel free to go ahead and approve all the other ones, and that's going to affect everybody's water that comes out of the Rocky Mountains. I've said my piece, and I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm willing to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thanks very much, David. Any questions from councillors? Obviously, this isn't the first time that High River's been involved in this fight to protect our eastern slope. So, Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Appreciate the information. This is it was interesting to hear kind of perspective of what's going on or what's happening down there. What were the referendum results? Do you know? Because I haven't seen any of that.
I'm sorry?
The referendum that they did?
They haven't done it yet.
They haven't done it yet?
It's on the 25th.
The 25th, okay. I did see that. I didn't know that was a referendum. Then I guess one question is, have you had any communication with Ranchlands?
Oh, yeah, we're at Ranchlands right, even as we speak. We're communicating with the Ranchlands Council right now with this exact same message.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did meet with them once before in a public meeting, about 6 weeks ago, when the referendum was called. We went to see them right away, and we said, you know, Crow's Nest Pass has just called a referendum about putting a mine in your jurisdiction. What do you think about that? Well, you can imagine what they thought about that.
Right.
Another thing that's happening up there that I think is offensive. I'm a proud resident of Crow's Nest Pass, by the way, and it doesn't give me any pleasure to diss my community's local government. Ranchland asked the Alberta Energy Regulator to postpone or to suspend the upcoming hearings that are to deal with Northback's application to drill exploratory holes at Grassy Mountain. And Crow's Nest Pass Council hired its own lawyer to go before the Energy Board and fight Ranchland's request for an adjournment. Now that's outrageous. That's one municipality hiring a lawyer, undertaking a legal proceeding to challenge a perfectly legitimate request by a neighboring municipality before a provincial regulator. This council's out of control. It's completely taken over by the mining company. It's no longer a legitimate municipal government, in my opinion. And I think that the Provincial Municipal Affairs Department should have a look at what's going on over there.
Okay. Appreciate your answers. Thanks.
Yeah, the referendum, David, is definitely, you know, you and I both have and obviously Northback is doing a significant amount of public propaganda to support their position, of course, down there. We've seen that, and they're doing lots of cash handouts and everything else to prop their position up for this referendum. But at the end of the day, regardless of how that referendum goes, that council can do as they see fit with that, right? With the results of that referendum.
Well, they've said when they called it, they said it was non-binding. But
Correct.
a couple of days ago in the local newspaper, the mayor said that it would be binding if they win. It would not only be binding on them, it would be binding on the future councils, which is again illegal.
Correct.
I mean, these people don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the limits of their
Which
powers.
is the goofiness of
They're goofy.
referendums
That's the
and
polite word for
non-binding
it.
and binding,
Yeah.
because you're not allowed to handcuff future councils.
That's right.
Which means binding
Yeah,
referendums
and they're
are,
paying $27,000 of
100%.
taxpayer money to hold this referendum on behalf of Northback.
exactly. Now, and with Grassy Mountain, you know, Grassy, what happens down there, what happens in your municipality, will it directly affect High River? No, we're in different
I believe
watersheds.
it will because it
But
will.
Just let me
I'm sorry.
finish, David.
Apologize.
That being said, we all know what's going to happen, and Councillor Nychuk's not here, but Councillor Nychuk and I met with Northback CEO Mike Young in this building a couple months ago, and I put that to him because his question was why are you involved with this? And it's pretty clear that as soon as if Grassy's allowed to go, the only loadout for that coal is on the Highway 3 rail line, whatever the actual rail line's called. So if Grassy goes, all the mines going north will follow, because the amount of infrastructure and that loadout that's going to be right in your backyard, the mine will be in the MD Ranchlands. It's a loadout, and all the problems that come with that, like they're having in Sparwood, that's what's going to be in your guys' backyard, and that's not okay. But for us, this is why Grassy is very important to High River, because if it goes, they will all follow, because all of the coal goes south to that rail line to head for Vancouver and then around the world. So That's the goofiness of this referendum, and I have talked to the Premier about this in the past when she made those comments about, we'll let the locals decide. Like, well, who are the locals? Because the MDT Ranch Lands is 99 people. And that's where the mine is. That's where the application is. The application is still denied by the AER, the Alberta Energy Regulator, and the federal government. That hasn't changed. So even if they get this petition in their favor, and even if the government of Alberta says, yeah, we've got our answer, away we go, there's still a long road to climb uphill. But as we've seen with the actions of Brian Jean, the energy minister, pretty easy that he's just going to write letters. So what we will do, and we'll discuss this not in this space of the meeting, but I do not believe, and I think it's important that High River does send a letter to the Premier that the government of Alberta should not be using this referendum as any type of reason to proceed with Grassy Mountain, because the eastern slopes are all of Alberta's. They don't belong just to the Crow's Nest Pass, period.
That's right.
So that's kind of where we'll take this from here. Any other comments, David?
I just thank you for, understanding what's at stake here.
We are very clear. We know exactly what's going on. So thanks, David.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, the next delegation is from Systemic Architecture in the Highwood Village North Apartments. Good, Chad?
Hello. Yep.
You are Chad, correct?
Yes, I am Chad.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Can you
Go
hear me
ahead.
okay?
Yep.
Then I can just take it away. Okay, thank you. Through the committee, and again, my name's Chad Russell. My client partners group is here present as well in case there's any questions for the owners. And so I'll just kind of run you through a bit of the application. I'm going to talk a little bit about our process as we looked at this and some of the challenges that we were faced when we were designing it. Kind of just real big picture. I'm an architect, born and raised Southern Albertan, grew up on a ranch, and then later in my career, I also was chair of Calgary's Urban Design Review Panel for 6 years. I say that only to contextualize some goalposts that I typically operate in. That is that I pride myself on being a very practical designer, and within that really understand the current bylaw that we're operating in, and kind of within that, the intent of the bylaw. I think that's a real crux of why we're here today, looking at some of the variances from, you'll know this information, but in your own bylaw, the variance is the means which the development authority may adjust the standard of the bylaw. And a general understanding on the definition of a variance, sometimes called application or relaxations, would be the variances are generally understood to be justified when conditions of the lot create undue hardship for a landowner through difficulty to comply with the typical bylaw requirements. I think that's very straightforward, and really good examples of that are slope. Sometimes slope on a site. There are interpretations on how that can be adjusted and affect what can be built. That's not really a concern here. Two other very frequent pieces that drive variances are the lot configuration as well as existing structures, infrastructure. And so that is kind of like the lead in. to the presentation because that's where I want to focus. And you'll hear me talk a lot about the intent of the bylaw and how we are trying to make it, even though there are a couple variances that we're going to talk about. So I'll just kind of run through the slides. This was meant to be a fairly informal walkthrough, but so if anybody has anything that they want to stop me on and ask during the presentation, that's perfectly good with me. And then obviously the question period at the end is also fine. So first slide, or next slide. So just an overall view of High River, a few main pieces to kind of comment on, just giving some location to the site and some of the main road network. The main one highlighted, High Country Drive. It's not very far from here. I'm sure everyone's familiar. And so I'll keep it brief because you're more familiar with it than even I am. But as we looked at it and studied it, there's a few pieces that I'd like to kind of just touch on. Slide 3. Our site, highlighted in red here. As we first started looking at it, I think just some of the interfaces, contextually, what we're up against in terms of the perimeter of the site and how that's kind of influenced a little bit of the layout, not sharing kind of all the detail minutia of our decision-making process, but primary access coming off of High Country, noted there. And then there's a secondary access on the north, more of a right-in, right-out, commercial development fronting that corner. Kind of like really drives, I think, 2 internal access points to the residential development. This overall parcel is designed to be mixed use in the sense that a portion of it, the piece of the application that's in front of you today, is residential. And then the existing portion with a Tim's, gas bar, some CRU, kind of like interfacing at the corner. So internally, there's really kind of 2 main drivers to access this part of the site. Also hatched in blue, we have some utility right-of-ways flanking on the west and a fairly wide one on the south, as well as at the front of High Country, and a bit of a pocket easement for an existing vault. So again, that's just some relation to geometry and also existing infrastructure that's affecting the design. I think as I move forward, something that was really in our minds, my owner, the client's minds, is trying to create a little bit of a village, hence the name. So buffering some of these perimeter pieces, influences. There's a maintenance yard to the south and another seniors development with some parking to the west, and then of course the commercial development that wraps around to the north and east. On the next slide, slide 4, just running through again a little bit of an overlay on the site plan. I'll keep this fairly brief. Those same access points kind of like maintained through, we looked at multiple iterations, but this one, again, creating a bit of a internal community there for the residents, interfacing with parking. We know that underground parking's not really ideal at this location in relation to water events, water tables, that side of things, and also trying to create a bit of a buffer to kind of what's the back door of that commercial area. So, fronting, when we come into some of the variances later, our building 1 is really creating a bit of a front door to that major primary access point for this greater parcel. And then some alignments with circulation as it relates to kind of what's there and really feeding into the drive aisles in a uniquely shaped lot with, some unique interfaces. On slide 5, just a quick snapshot of what it looks like along that frontage. So top image, you can see the Tim Hortons, that's kind of looking right at the corner. There's a drive-through, double loaded at that interface for the Tims. Below that, you see kind of that main access point that we are treating as our front door to the overall development. Left side of that image is the subject parcel. The right side's the existing commercial. And then on the lower one, as you shift a little bit further south, looking at the maintenance yard, that existing interface, the residential that's beyond, and then again the subject parcel a little bit on the right hand side, just to give a bit of a feel of how that boundary is situated currently and how ultimately we're looking to improve upon it with this development. On number 6, sheet 6 here, just a little bit of an overall showing the context along High Country. So there is a real mixture of interfaces. I just kind of like maybe moving from west to east. We have some front yards with some sidewalks. We have a gas bar, commercial area. It's got circulation right on the corner, driveway entrances. Further to the east, we've got some cul-de-sacs. They have driveway parking around the perimeter, garage interfaces, kind of like immediately, and those exist kind of intermittently throughout some of High Country. And then there's a great deal of front driveways, obviously parking on the street, in the driveway, garages. And then last kind of example, just trying to pick up kind of all the context that's there, is Notre Dame, that has a large amount of parking directly fronting into High Country. It does have a landscape boulevard. I can't comment if there's a URW running through there, but there's really kind of no landscaping. And my overall kind of take here is just looking at those conditions and saying, hey, that doesn't trump what the bylaw is suggesting or driving at. But there is a lot of vehicular presence that's taking place. We're going to look to try to situate a building against High Country to the best we can, and likely there's going to be some parking that's visible, and we're going to try to screen that parking with landscaping. And so that is, as we look at that interface, some of the context that meets up with High Country. So slide 7, again, that's a landscape plan. That's really just kind of inserted into the package as a bit of a reference if we need to come back to it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with it, and we can refer back to it. Most of my pieces I want to say are on the next slides, but along High Country, there is a lot of plantings done in a decorative manner, shrubs, trees where we can get them that are outside of the URWs that are kind of buffering that edge, along with the building and a sliver of parking. On slide 8, a whole bunch of stats that we don't need to look at. Again, mostly just for reference. If something comes up, we can zoom into it. In blue is the URWs as it relates to being registered on title. Again, along the west, the south, and along the frontage of High Country, and a pocket easement that's shown in blue, and in red is our shallow utility easement. So you can see there's a fair amount at play here as it relates to what's happening underground and is registered, and our ability to front a building onto High Country is really limited. So again, the current proposed placement that we think is a really appropriate solution is kind of fronting that entrance corner and that driveway off of High Country to give it a sense of arrival, pushing the building as close as we can to the property line, which is impacted by the existing vault that's on site. And again, some URWs that are limiting how wide we can make that frontage. And so this is a good diagram that will allow me to jump into the specific variances that are being requested. So on slide 9, the first one to speak to, I would like to just talk about the frontage. So as we look at this image, it's zoomed in a little bit more. From the bylaw, it requires 70%, and what we're proposing is 26. And I think if you look at those two numbers, it seems like quite shocking how low of a percentage it is. But as you look at the geometry of the site, this, by definition, is taken from the setback line. I inserted just a clip there from the bylaw for reference. So it's the percentage of the lot line occupied by the building facade measured from the setback. So kind of in red, little difficult to see. Hopefully you can see it on your screens fairly well. But in red, that's the long line across the front is our setback line. And you can just see by looking at the lot configuration that really skews our numbers to something that it's at least half of that is not achievable because it is truly just a sliver of land that on the south piece. So in reality, the frontage, and it kind of has a yellow scribble, I would argue is we can't make that work in any way, shape, or form because of the URWs and the dimensions of that portion. So the real piece that's applicable is in the kind of the top northwest portion where our building is fronting. And again, you can see the hatches on the easements that are taking place and how we are trying to push our building to the front and front that street, which in my perspective is the intent of the bylaw. We're getting it as close as possible. We're fronting the building as we're able to due to the geometry and that existing infrastructure. And that's kind of like the first part of the variance. And really, all of these variances that we're talking about here today are related as it relates to configuration, existing infrastructure, and the next one on slide 10, primary entrance for a building required by the bylaw faces the primary thoroughfare, and what's proposed is more internal to the site. So zoomed in at that building one, our main building entrance, and we have two secondary entrances that front that driveway entrance. It's true, that main connection is not facing the street. Now, again, I think it's a lot different when we have single-family homes that have a driveway and have a garage out front. It's very natural to front the road. When we have larger developments with parking pools, I think what you want to do is create an orientation for wayfinding that if people are using the sidewalk, people are walking down the street, those types of things, the wayfinding is very natural and direct. And so highlighted in yellow is the pedestrian network that's created to bring people to the front door. And so there's a direct sight line to all three of those, but primary that main entrance, and also from an ease of, your day-to-day, you're parking the car, you're bringing in groceries, this sort of thing. You want it to be functionally direct as possible. So the front door faces the parking pool, but as it relates to the traffic in this angled geometry, I still believe that front door is highly recognizable on this building. And if you were to, slap a front door on that elevation that's facing high country, I just believe it might meet the intent of the bylaw, but it's not that functional, and it doesn't add anything to the development from a functionality perspective. And again, sight lines, encouraging pedestrian use, all of those, I would respond that the network of the sidewalks really supports that active use, not only on the vehicle, but knowing people are still driving vehicles. Slide 11, related to building, well, I think I might have missed one, sorry. It's on the same slide, slide 10, sorry, just to back you up one. The other one is the front yard setback. This is probably the one that is of least discussion with the group, or there's not a lot we can do because we are pushed right up to where that existing vault is shown in blue. Required by the bylaw, you can be situated at a 0 meter setback up to 3, and we are 8.58 meters, again, totally in response to trying to situate our building as close to that vault, understanding we have foundations to account for, and then that pushes our building back further. I think that one is pretty clear. Putting anything else there is simply not possible due to the infrastructure that's in place. And then the last one that I'll go into just a little bit more detail on is the building step back. So what's required by the bylaw is floors above the second story shall be stepped back from the primary frontage for a minimum of 2.5. We haven't proposed any step back in our current design. And again, that's specific to the floors that are above the second story. So we have a 4-story building that's proposed. And the reason behind this, if we go to the next slide, I think there's a section. Yeah, so that section in the bottom left, this is where I'll focus most of my discussion. This is putting the eave right to the property line. So this is, except for this section of the bylaw, this would be allowed. You can have a 4-story building, you can push it right up to the property line, and you get this sense of scale. There's an individual, all of this is to scale. So you can see that kind of over-towering scale of the building not being exactly proportionate to the person. So the intent here is to break down the scale of a building, in my perspective, especially when it's pushed up against the property line, but we'll look at it as we pull off the property line too, and just what that sense of scale does. My main premise here, where I'll go with my argument on intent of the bylaw, is that further away something is, the reduced scale it has. And so when it's right up against a property line, it's more important than if it's pulled off of the property line or pushed, in our case, even further back, because we have these easements to deal with. So on the next slide, it shows, and we've kind of ghosted out the previous 0 meter setback. Now we're showing a 3 meter setback. So again, this is the maximum that's envisioned by the bylaw, no step. So you still see a very tall building that, as a pedestrian, is kind of over top of you. And the next slide, we look at the same, this is the 0 meter setback with that building step of about 2.5 meters. And then you start to feel, okay, the edge of that building face, there's a step that's taking place, so it kind of steps back, and it has a little bit of a softer interface with the public realm, breaking down that building scale. But on the next slide, this is what's proposed currently. So again, I think as it relates to human scale and being up against a building is a lot different when you're pulled back nearly 9 meters and that building's further back. And so this is what's proposed currently without the building step. Now, whenever we look at projects designs, feedback from planning authorities, I will say that I take that meaningfully. We try to study it and see if we can find a solution that works, and then weigh for ourselves, do we think it's a good solution? Is it acceptable for a number of other elements that could be at play? But really look at it meaningfully and see what takes place. But this slide, in my opinion, shows what the bylaw is intending and what we're proposing, and I think that it's even further removed from a scale factor. That kind of sight line shows how, as you look up, that building is being pulled back with the step, but being pushed back further, I find it to have a lot less impact, and that it's really already meeting the intent of something that could be built up against the property line. So to humor kind of ourselves and to see what the impact would be, on the next slide, slide 15, what we have here is okay, we use the footprint of our building shown in red in the site plan. What we would look to do if we had to incorporate this building step is we'd probably shift our building back a bit and create some additional area on levels 1 and 2 to build into that step. It would take some adjustment to the site plan. There's a loading stall that could be flipped. There's some sidewalk interfaces that would need to be changed around, but it's possible. Now, I think that as you still look at that section in the bottom left corner, it's way beyond what the bylaw envisions in the intent. It does have a step, but the building's already pulled off of the property line due to the existing infrastructure. And my position would be the value of that is far eroded when compared to something that's within that 0 to 3 meters as the bylaw is envisioning. So one more slide, the next slide is what does that look like to our building? And currently, these 3 buildings, the focus is trying to get units onto the market to provide a high-quality standard of living and units for future residents. And if I can speak plainly, in this type of scenario, the more units, kind of the better as it relates to trying to maximize the development. We're all familiar with housing crisis kind of generally that's taking place. And so we would look to add that area at the bottom. But on my next slide, we don't need to go to it yet, is what we're currently designing, which from my perspective is a better architectural solution. We don't have to give up landscape for it. It creates a better buffer on all sides of the building, and it just kind of frankly looks better. So this is just kind of cobbled together to say this is what the elevation would do, and then on the next slide is kind of going back to what we have proposed currently. Obviously, that's a more polished rendering. The other one is just showing the effect of the massing. But I think you can envision this is what we have. I think it's a very clean, high-quality building with nice finishes of brick, sedimentitious panel, board and batten, and horizontal siding, and it's consistent throughout the development for a more unified design. I think with the setback there, you can see all of this in this drawing is to scale, and it's relevant. It's done in Revit, which just means the massing here is exactly specific to what's being proposed. So from the intent of the landscaping that's shown in there, which is quite accurate, the width of the boulevard, the width of the dimension between the sidewalk and the building, this is the quality of interface we're going to get. And there's a little bit of parking beyond, which has been buffered by the landscape that's on there. And that touches on those main variances. There's 2 other variances that I believe I can answer some questions about. They're not specific to the building step. It has more to do with amenity, and so I'll just kind of open the floor up as that kind of like concludes the presentation side of things, specific to building placement, the setbacks, and as I kind of probably hammered, what I feel is the intent of the bylaw, which would support these variances.
Thanks, Chad. Any questions from council? I've got a few, but it's more directed for Sarah or whoever's coming up next, so.
Yes, I do have a presentation.
Okay.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Thank you for your presentation. I do agree the building, I think they look nice and modern. One of my questions is about the entrance sort of facing the boulevard or facing towards the street. In the way you have it set up, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to put an entrance on that side. But having an entrance sort of face the frontage, I think it looks more appealing and more inviting. On here, we see the side of a building and a bunch of parking. Right? So that boulevard is very much used by a lot of people. And your entrances also will now cause a lot of congestion or a lot of people entering into that area, which in my opinion isn't very large. So I don't know, it's beautiful, but it's kind of not appealing from the street view, right?
Yeah, maybe I could just get that last image up just so it's in kind of on the screen as we're answering the question, but I think, fair. I also think that, and maybe actually, I'll get you to hop back to the first slide even, kind of just shows more of the context of overall development. But I mean, whenever I think about, okay, something, if you put an entrance there, you're giving something up. You don't just get an entrance because all of a sudden that'll push some of your circulation, your stairs into that location coming off of your main entrance, right? When you come in the entrance, you usually have elevators, and you have a stair. So if that becomes your main entrance, you have elevators and stair. So as soon as you get up on past the main floor, you have more elevators and stairs, you actually tend to lose windows because elevators and stairs typically aren't real permeable elements of a building related to escape. So you actually kind of like, in a roundabout way, currently those elements are kind of tied into the middle of the floor plan, and they don't require that light to come in there, and you have more light coming into units. The end of the building is always a very desirable unit because not everyone's an end unit, so you're kind of losing something as you're trying to add something. And so I do think that, again, back to a day-to-day resident perspective, that doorway is better situated with a direct connection to the parking area, assuming, and which we have, you have strong connections to the sidewalk still. And I think that we have straight connections leading out. So I still do kind of firmly believe that it's a better solution, not that, one can be considered, but I think that from a functionality perspective, and again, I do like the look of the building. I think it's very clean. I think when it's constructed, it'll be very close to matching the elevations or being even more convincing in terms of the quality of the materials that don't always come through in a 3D.
Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Perhaps I missed it in the written presentation we got, but what's the occupancy for this development?
It's residential.
No, the numbers.
Oh.
How many units, how many people?
Yeah, so 120, about 40 per building.
120 units,
Yeah,
with an average per unit of 2 people, 4 people?
well, there is a mix of unit types here between the majority of them being 1 and 2 bedrooms. There is a little bit of 2-bedroom dens, and so again, I'd say you'll have some single occupants. You could have some small families as well.
Okay. All this is great, I guess, me being vocal. My concern is the primary access and that many people coming in and out of that spot. I don't get how that works, but I'm not engineering, so thanks.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. And thank you for your presentation. It was, I thought, very well done and thorough. The parking, the mass amount of parking to accommodate that number of units and residents, the movement of the people, particularly as they come and go to work, that is a concern. My first thought, not just coming in off of High Country Drive, I'm seeing massive congestion on your north exit. Well, there really only is one way out. Like, you can come in from the north and you can come in off of High Country Drive, but you cannot exit going north other than that one location. The reality is the majority of people would be going to the main thruway or downtown, but I see big congestion right there. So either some type of road allowance to be incorporated in, but otherwise I think one road, it's not ideal.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it'll look great.
Sure. Yep. Thank you.
No other questions, Chad, so thanks very much, and we'll have Sarah come forward and she can give us her presentation, and we'll keep going on it, but
Sounds
well
good.
done. Very well done.
And I'll return if there are further questions after that. So thank you.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. All yours, Sarah.
Okay, perfect. I also have a presentation that Marcel will help me with. Okay, perfect. So Marcel, do you want me to tell you when to, oh, can I control it here? Awesome. Nice. Okay, that's great. So during my presentation, I'm going to go through all of the variances that have been requested by the applicant and provide administration's comments on those. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the size of the common amenity space area. So the land use bylaw requires 10% of the total lot area to be common amenity space, and the proposal is just a little bit less, 8.4. But what I want to bring your attention to is the items that are included in the common amenity space. So our land use bylaw defines common amenity space as the following. So I'll just read it here. Common amenity space means an area comprised of on-site communal indoor or outdoor space designated for active or passive recreational use by the users of the lot. So the applicant has included a variety of elements in the common amenity space that makes up that 8.4% of the lot. They include assembly seating. They include a community garden space, which I think will be an excellent addition to that area. But they do also include the patios, the balconies, and those are the ones that are connected to people's individual units, as well as the bicycle storage structures. So in this diagram, all of the green indicates that, and in the previous slide, I did make sure that that was highlighted as how they are coming to that, that total. So administration has no concerns with, of course, including the assembly seating area and the community garden. The community garden was actually an idea that we discussed with the applicant collaboratively, and we thought that would be a great addition to the site. However, we do have concerns when it comes to the individual people's patios, the individual people's balconies, and the bicycle storage structures. The patios and the balconies are part of people's individual units. They can't really be called communal space. And the bicycle storage structures, that's a separate, we would consider that to be a separate requirement under the land use bylaw. Certainly, we are open to a variance of less than 10%. However, administration really does urge the applicant to consider other possible ways that they could provide some additional common and amenity space that provide value to the tenants and encourage these community interactions. For example, play structures have been a popular choice for developments that encourage at least some families, because there will be 3 bedrooms. In addition, the developer has mentioned that there could be an opportunity for increasing the size of the community garden in the future if they find that it's very popular with the residents, and administration would certainly be on board with that as well. Our main concern is really just including those patios and those balcony spaces. Furthermore, the proposed community garden, so that's at the very south end, right by where the town's operation yard is located technically in the required side yard setback of 1 meter. That does go against the requirements of the land use bylaw. It does say that the common amenity space cannot be located in a required setback, and this may prove to be a concern because the side yard setback is directly abutting the town's operation yard. The next one is the size of the landscaping area. So the land use bylaw requirement is 40%, and the proposal is just over 35%. The applicant has explained to us in their letter, as well as in today's presentation, that a lot of that reason of not being able to provide the full 40% is because of the utility right-of-way. And of course, we have seen in today's presentation that there is quite a bit of utility right-of-way on the site. However, the amount of proposed parking was not discussed in the rationale. So there may be reasons why the developer does require 194 parking stalls plus 5 visitor stalls for 117 units. However, that reason was not provided in the rationale when we're talking about how much landscaped area is being provided in this application. In addition, when we looked more closely at this diagram, and of course all of the other diagrams in the application package, we noted that some of the landscape areas include, again, a variety of different items. They seem to be including the patios and the lands and the balconies, things like garbage, recycling, compost bins, bicycle facilities, and even the crosswalks. The rationale having 40% landscaping in the land use bylaw was to ensure that there was a large amount of landscaping that residents could enjoy, because of course they do not have their own private balconies, own private backyards in this type of housing development. Certainly, administration would be open to a variant, but we would like to have that additional rationale as to why this amount of parking is required, and just a rethink about what all is included in the landscaped area. The next one is the building 1 frontage build out. So again, like the applicant was telling us today, the land use bylaw requirement is 70, proposal is 26. I think that the applicant today did a very good job of explaining why that is necessary. It's just a very difficult shaped lot. So we do understand, of course, they are also significantly constrained by the existing utility right of way. However, we would like the applicant to consider how maybe they could make the buildings more of a perimeter around the site. And we do understand that they're not able to flip the building 1. We don't have particular concerns about that, but we would recommend that they consider doing more of the buildings, and that's including the rest of the site. Let me go to the next slide. If the other buildings could be more of around the perimeter, it could make for a more built-out feel. Particularly, I would like to draw your attention to the row of parking that's kind of along the Tim Hortons. I don't think I have a pointer, but there is a row of parking that's right along where that Tim Hortons is. Thank you for that. And that will involve people, like let's say if they just drive in and drive into their stall, they will have to back out potentially when that area, we have talked about it, does get quite congested, especially when it's really busy in Tim Hortons. And that might be not the most ideal situation. So if they could move the building more towards the perimeter, that could alleviate that concern as well, would be our suggestion. Moving right along to primary entrance of building number 1. Again, I think the applicant did a very good job of explaining the situation and the context around this one. And again, we just recommend that the applicant could consider placing all of the buildings more around the site's perimeter, and then that would address parking visibility, and that would address massing, and maybe in turn making all of the buildings a more pedestrian-friendly development. So certainly, we're not going to get hung up on the fact that it does not have an entrance right along that corridor, but again, we suggest maybe making those tweaks could ultimately lead to a more pedestrian-friendly environment. Again, the applicant did a very good job of explaining what is going on with the front yard setback. There is a utility vault. It cannot be moved, and the town administration does not have any concerns about this one. And then finally, the step back. I think the applicant did an excellent job of explaining what the requirements are and what their proposal is. And that's the side of it right now as it stands. I think they explained well that because of that vault, it will be set back much further than we might have expected it. So there is that distance. However, administration doesn't believe by simply setting the building back a greater distance, in this case 8.58 meters, we do not believe that the goal of creating a human scale is being achieved simply by setting it back that distance. We think that there is more that can be done to that side of the building to create that more human feel. And further, in the letter, we don't believe that the applicant has adequately explained why the step back is definitely not possible. Of course, today we were given some more ideas and very relevant information, but we still do not feel like just sending the building back that extra distance creates that human feel. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions for staff?
Thanks, Sarah. And as with any variance, we have to always look at these as site-specific, and I think a big part of the problem for anybody developing on this lot is, I don't know if it's the past historical, if there's an ASP on this piece or not, but
There's an ACP.
An ACP?
Yeah.
Never heard of it. That one's
That's
new
okay.
to me, so what is that?
It's the
Area
Ellis
concept plan?
Exactly. It's
Okay,
the Ellis
good
Area
guess, Craig.
Concept Plan.
Okay. Regardless, you got a wonky lot that you're trying to do something with, and yeah, I agree with what, Councillor Walsh is saying. There's going to be road congestion there, but I don't, I think there was a grocery store that was previously proposed at that site, but that outfit chose a different direction or sold off. I don't know what happened, but regardless, you're going to have road construction on anything that's kind of attached to or being built on this lot. So I'll start with Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. A couple of comments and questions. One is this property backs right onto the town property.
It does.
And as we're aware that eventually we're going to be leaving there, and I'm a little concerned about what this development impact will have on that, but that's just a comment. Removing the balconies from the common use area, have you run the numbers on what percentage now it drops from? It's going to go down from 8.4. Where does it go down to?
I'm not entirely sure how big that will be, but yes, I would like to take a closer look at those numbers once we have them.
Because I think that'll have a significant impact on that common use area, and including, of course, removing the bike area as you brought up.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, administration does not want to get too hung up on it has to be 10% or it has to be close to 10%. And certainly the applicant did say that they could possibly extend the gardens if they prove to be popular, because there was an area of space that is left vacant. But I think it is important, like you said, to have the proper numbers, and then we can assess it with those numbers.
Right, because I don't want to look at a variance without having real digits, right? And then the last one is I'm a little concerned about the parking. There's a number of businesses over there, and when you sort of mix up, and when I looked at the drawing, there's no defining line between what would be a business and what would be the residential. And how are we going to, I can hear it now, the businesses are going to be complaining because the residents are all parking out front of their businesses. So is there a way we can really delineate between those two parking areas? That would be my only other comment.
And I think you do bring up a very good point. Would I be able to bring up one of the last slides to show that again? Sorry, thank you. So if we're looking at this one, I completely agree with what you're saying. If we could move that eastern building further towards Tim Hortons and not have that line of parking, because I completely agree with what you are saying, that sometimes the residents might be taking up the business parking. By the same token, perhaps people who are visiting Tim Hortons or other businesses might inadvertently park on that strip. So we don't want that. If they could be more perimeter focused, I think it would address that concern.
Thank you. Those are my comments.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. When you talk about common space, is this outdoor common space only?
It actually allows for either indoor or outdoor. So that would allow, for example, if a condominium building wanted to have like an indoor party room, an indoor gym facility, that type of thing. But it really is for something that everyone who is a tenant or who is an owner, in the case of condo, would be able to access.
So there's no indoor common space in these plans?
No, there's no indoor, there's no like party room or something of that nature. No, that is correct.
Okay. So I do agree that, like, especially when you have 117 units, let's just say 300 people living there, there needs to be space for people to go, whether it's to go outside and have a cigarette, it's somewhere to walk your dog, whatever it is. I do agree that the common space is important, and to, not include somebody else's patio. I think that's important as well. And the only other one that I had was that, like, already the entrances, you have to go into the Tim Hortons area or up by Esso, and it's very congested. It already can be congested there, especially in the mornings when people are getting their coffee. And then to have that parking along that side just is going to cause huge issues when people are trying to back out or back in, even besides the fact that people will want to park there or park elsewhere. I think that particular parking spot just makes no sense to me and could cause huge issues. So yeah, I can't see that. But it is true, when you go out from the Esso, you can only go one direction.
Yes.
I don't know if that can be changed ever or not with a light or something, but that just means more people are going to come out the one side, and there are times where that's quite a busy road.
Thank you.
Yeah, that parking piece in the Tim Hortons, just so you guys are aware, whether you're familiar with what goes on over there, like most of us are that see it every day. That's where everybody with a trailer, horse trailer, landscaping companies, everybody that's going for lunch at Tim Hortons, that's where they're at. So that's just, I'll give you a little bit of local knowledge on what goes on there. Whether you can do anything about it or not, I don't know, but Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was my point too, is that is a real pinch point, and it's already a difficulty, because when you have people coming out from, whether it's from the vet clinic or from the Esso, and you're trying to round that corner, it's already a hazard because they don't have to stop. And there's a spot on the parking lot by the liquor store there that is also not signed for stopping. So the only stopping point is where the plus sign is right now on that picture. There's a stop sign there, but there isn't one closer to where the pizza place and the liquor store is. So if you've got people coming and going from a parking space there, it's just asking for trouble, I think, right there. Because you've got the blind corner coming around from the vet clinic, right, and the subway, and then you've got the stop sign for the traffic coming out of the drive-through, and then you've got nothing regulating whether you're swinging into the Tim Hortons pace or going to park in front of Tim's itself or the liquor store. So
Exactly.
I think that is a very big safety concern, for sure. Thank you.
Councillor Barton?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess one of the first things I have is if I look at the drawing that's up there and then the drawing that Systemic had provided, Systemic has one where it has the blue access points, arrows. Building 3, it kind of looks like on both drawings here, not only your Systemic's rendering and this one, that we actually have access points right across from Riverwood Veterinary Clinic. Is that correct? So there's actually 3 access points into it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to use that now. So there's a little more flow out than just those 2 points, is what I'm getting at. So there's 3 points. So, totally agree with everybody here. I have concerns just with the parking where everybody, the landscapers and buses and everybody, right? I try to avoid going there first thing in the morning because of a lot of that. It just gets quite congested, but so that's one thing I think we do need to look at. The other part that I think we need to look at is that north access point, how that looks. I have no idea how we can change it, or I know it's just a little tight getting in there when you're coming off the highway. So that's one thing to look at now. When this whole area structure plan was, and I'm just spitballing, this is something thrown out there. The north side of Sunrise structures, there's another lot that's there, right? That I believe Ellis's own.
Correct.
So I guess my point is how does this development, the commercial development, and then whatever else is going in there, plus Sunrise, we should have some other flow coming off of maybe the golf course road on the north side of Sunrise. I don't know how we can do something like that, but I agree. We need to have more access points in and out of there, because right now I think even if and I'm, again, just speculation, if we were to double the amount of traffic going in and out of just Tim Hortons without this proposed developments, it'd get very frustrating. So
Absolutely.
I don't know. I think that's just, and I mean, it's not necessarily directed towards you guys, but more towards development side of things. It's something that we need to look at. I like the development. I don't really have any issues with any of the variances. But I think it's just that the traffic flow for me is a big piece, because that's at the end of the day, somebody's not going to, like you even commented, we're not really worried about if it's on a common amenity space if we're exactly 10%, because nobody's going to know if it's 9.5 or if it's 10.5. At the end of the day.
That's right. We just want to provide a functional amenity or amenities for people to enjoy and come together in a community way.
Yeah. Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Walsh?
Thank you, and thank you for all of the information. First, I just want to address the common space requirements. The way that it's written would be perceived differently in a condo where, example, I own and live, versus a condominium complex where they're all renters. There is not going to be a social room, nor a theater room, nor a gym. Those are usually owned independently. So the spaces that have been created, they support the environment of community in a rental type complex, in my opinion. I think everybody's pretty much on the same boat with the parking. My first feeling doing anything in front of the vet clinic and around over to, I think a lot of it, our perception of how uncomfortable it is in that parking lot is because there's a big hole or pile of dirt where you propose to build this beautiful complex. It's very unfinished. So you drive along and, oh, the road just ends. And then there's some Jersey barriers over here. So even coming in from the north, if I was to come into that shopping center, the approach coming in, that alone has to be redone. That's not their issue. That being said, can we not improve access ourselves coming in off of Center Street or Highway 2A? It is a main throughway. So that addresses it on both sides. But the parking is definitely the biggest, or access.
Councillor Kinghorn?
Thanks. This is kind of spurred on one other question. So the access point off of High Country Drive, is that public or is that owned by the developer in there? Like how much of that are we responsible for going into that property?
It's owned by it's under a condominium, so they're all technically condominiums. However, this one is going to be rental, so they're not going to further condominiumize it. But you are correct that it is all, like this one is unit 3 technically of the condominium, and you are correct that it is privately owned on the other side.
So that access point onto High Country Drive is going to be the responsibility of somebody within this complex or somebody within this area? Because we've got this issue over here, right?
The commercial area.
The commercial area would be
that
responsible
unit.
for maintaining that piece of road there.
That is their land, yes.
Thank you.
Could I clarify? So the intersection itself on High Country Drive would be the town. But at the moment you, generally the back of the sidewalk is approximately where the delineation between condo and town would be. So if you look at the sidewalk there and go to the back side of it, that's roughly where the condo's responsibility would start and the town would end.
So would the group that owns this normally work together on keeping that road maintained and all the maintenance and stuff and everything that needs to go on with that?
Generally, the condo would take care of it. Yes, there should be, and I don't know, Sarah, maybe you can comment on this, but generally there's a condo that takes care of the common roads and the common parking within a development. So I don't know if there's with the commercial, there should have been, was there not a condo?
The commercial, there is a condo, so whoever is the owner of that condominium, they are dealing with the snow removal and the maintenance. It's not up to the individual tenants like the vet clinic to be dealing with that matter.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to go with individuals. I'm saying if the town doesn't own this, who's responsible for maintaining that road? Is it this development we're looking at today, or is it the existing commercial development that's over there? Who's responsible for it?
Not the town.
I know.
Not the town.
But who does it matter from there?
Well, because we'll get blamed for it, just as we have on these other places where we don't have the...
Same answer. Not our land.
Yeah.
To find out, we'd have to pull, there'd be a access agreement on it and we'd have to pull the title.
That's what I'd like. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda?
Thank you. Is there a right-of-way required from the development to make access, obviously big access? Have you looked into the right-of-way with the commercial condominium group? Either that or redesigning your entrance from the north? Because if that's their road, I'm
I can speak to that. You want me to come up?
Yeah, sure.
Should we switch? Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Greg Gutek with Partners Development Group. Thank you for your time this afternoon. So we are the owners of the commercial development as well. We developed that in 2013. And yeah, just to clarify some of those overarching issues, there'll be an access easement agreement on those lands in the event we sell either parcel, because eventually, we're not going to be there forever. And our primary business is multifamily development. So we understand those concerns, and we try to, as good developers, try to prevent those situations. So yeah, there'll be an access easement granted by us to the other parcel of land, and a maintenance agreement as well between both parcels, so that you can pull that and there's no fallback to the town on that. So yeah, and one thing I'd like to add is just for kind of separating the residential parcel from the commercial, because that's important for us too, for our new residences, to give them some privacy from the commercial use. We have proposed a decorative fence along all the north, east, and the entrance along the property with landscaping along that buffer. The only real interface, and we consider that too, I do come here quite often for coffees and drive, I live between here and Okotoks, and it is a cluster there, I agree, and that's one of our motivations to build this this development out, is to give some continuity to that access. So that one parking queue, I appreciate where you're coming from. Yeah, I feel your concerns there. Our motivation to park this is almost 50% of the units are 3 bedrooms. When we got the report from the town, we met with administration. We're here to bring something we feel the town needs. They are primarily 1 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, so there's 48 3 bedrooms in there. Our concern is that we don't want the complaint of the residents that'll move in here if they're 2-car parked, that we're short. So is there a compromise there? I suppose. Do we want them spilling onto the street or into the commercial is the other concern. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. We could hit all your landscape requirements, knock out those stalls, lose 30 stalls, and we can tick all the boxes. Is that the right decision? So that's what we're struggling with too, right? But the interface, I think we've done a good job on, and I think Chad and his team have. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So thanks very much, Sarah. I like the overall concept. I like the architectural design. We're talking about site-specific details that, are definitely not insurmountable. It's a discussion between the developers and our staff and council a little bit. If we're truly wanting to be a part of and be a community that values affordable housing, this is what this is. And, as a town, we cannot afford to build our own affordable housing. There's no question, but we rely on the development community to help us out. And just to kind of bring back to have a little bit of visual as to what I see this being comparable to is the Prairie Sound style development that's just down on High Country Drive. A previous land use bylaw that was developed under, but there's no common area that I know of in the Prairie Sound. There's a lot of parking inside there. Once you get inside, it's all parking. There's no green space. I'm not saying we don't do better now. That's why we changed the land use bylaws, to improve things from the way things were done in the past. But there's affordable housing, these new developments, and on a lot like this, there's got to be a little bit of give there. There's no question. So, Councillor Jones, and then we're going to finish up and move on.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Actually, I disagree. Prairie Sound, a lot of them have their own little front piece of grass.
Yep.
So they can go out and they can enjoy the sun or take their dog out, where if you don't have common space, where do they go from there? I don't know.
Well, and this is also four stories tall too, right?
No, I agree. So it is different, but
Yep.
When you say affordable, we don't even know, I don't know that we were even given what what the costs to buy one or what rental might be. So you can say affordable, but depends on what goes inside of them to make it that way, right?
100%. Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. Thanks, Lead. Oh, come on, we're trying to move along.
No, just, yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just an overall comment. I think when we look at the proposed development, I think normally administration, when an applicants come forward, we really from the beginning work together and collaborate. And whatever submitted first, when we reach this stage, we normally on the same page. And so it's give and take. I mean, in this situation, I think the applicant just chose not to really incorporate all comments from earlier until this point. And that's what has been proposed. It is what it is. And so, and I think when we look at the area overall, you know, it's a high density area. We look at the overall design. We don't talk only about pedestrian. We talk about the streetscape, the overall look and feel of the development, the design. And so when you have the step backs, it makes a big difference. When you have a quality and sufficient open space, it makes a big difference. When you have good accesses, when you minimize the amount of parking, you are overall having a great community that adds to the community, doesn't take away. When we just try to just add more numbers of units without really looking at the over impacts on the community, we lose at the end of the day. And so I think right now we have 5 variances. It would be really, my recommendation is that applicants should be willing to work with administration to compromise on some of the things and not to push it through the way it's being presented. Because in that case, it just makes big negative impacts in the area.
100%. I agree with you, Khalid. And it's about working together and coming up with some compromises that that we can both live with. And so my question is, where do we go from here, and what more do you need from council? Because council doesn't approve variances. So.
Yeah, I think the step back is big, and I think at least if the applicant, because they look at the numbers of the unit that they're producing more than anything else, and I think if they can at least compromise on at least 50-50, we can work with that.
Okay.
And that way we can at least allow them to have a mix of uses. And some of the buildings, you know, when you have a building with a step backs and a building without, it just makes a kind of combination of things that could really mitigate the massings of the overall development. At least that can be, something can be incorporated.
Okay, so this is a significant development. So do you want to work together and then come back in a couple of weeks and give us a little update at the next committee of the whole meeting? That fair? Okay, cool. Thanks very much. Update to subdivision development securities policy. Shalane?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Again, I have a presentation as well, so I'll just wait for that to be pulled up. Sorry, is there a presentation? Oh, okay. I can read it all. That's okay. I can run through it. Good thing I printed it off. Okay, I will make her quick. Right, the development and security policy was last revised on July 10th, 2015. In the fall of 2023, Dream Development made a request for council to consider surety bonds in a tiering system. Council directed administration to begin a review of this request from Dream, and the policy was also due for a review because it hadn't been done for quite some time. Stakeholder feedback was collected. The town surveyed 27 stakeholders, so developers and builders, to receive feedback on the policy. The key items from the stakeholder feedback were these 4 items: security reductions for development and subdivision amounts, adding surety bonds to the policy, considering a tiering system, and paying developers interests on securities being held by the town. So our administration ended up looking at the 4 following items: consideration of our tiering system, adding surety bonds as a permanent method of security in our policy, looking at our security amounts being collected, and also looking at our security reduction process. So for the tiering system, we looked at quite a few other communities and found that the objective of the tiering system is to lower security amounts required with better performance developers. We collected quite a bit of comments from municipalities that talked about criteria for being tiered. So for example, if a developer was a good performing developer, there's some research that needs to be done. For example, if they had 3 or 4 development agreements in the past, that needs to be reviewed, and then they needed to be rated to determine what tier that they fall in, which was quite a bit of work on administration's end. And also, if it's quite subjective as well. If there's a disagreement, then it ended up at the CAO level. So some of the positive aspects about the tiering system is that it's less burdensome for the securities for top-tier developers, and then higher securities for high-risk developers. And developers are able to use the funds to invest in other developments in the community when you're allowing the tiering system too, because they can use those funds for other things. So for the tiering system, the administration does not recommend moving ahead with the tiering system just because of how subjective it can be, and that there's a lot more work for administration to determine the criteria for a tiering system rather than just having a flat rate. For surety bonds. So the research that was conducted in last August in 2023, we reached out to 17 communities. 11 of those communities accept surety bonds as a form of security. Surety bonds now have the same protection as letters of credit. So this was one of our main concerns before, is that they did not provide the same level of protection. I know I had this conversation with Chris previously too, that there was some risk in accepting surety bonds. That's not the case anymore. So after speaking with all these communities, they promote them. The only downside to this is there's been nobody that has had to draw on securities through a surety bond. That's a downside for my research. However, it speaks well to all the developers that finish their work and we don't have to draw on those bonds. So for as far as surety bonds go, administration recommends moving ahead with surety bonds. We have already accepted surety bonds for 2 phases in the Dream development area, and they've gone very well. Moving on to the next one, which is security amounts. Currently, our subdivision and development security policy, it's broken out into 2 categories, one for development, one for subdivision. For development, right now it's 150% for offsite works and 25% of on-site works, and for subdivisions, it's 150% for offsite works. What we found, and what was highlighted by Dream, is that the town of High River is incredibly high in the amount of securities we collected. I did quite a bit of research with, I think, 17 other communities, and we are the highest by far. So what we basically did is found that range. It was between 75% all the way up to about 120%. So our recommendation moving forward for securities is to drop that down to 100% to align with more of the surrounding communities here. I do have some comparables in the presentation, and just to give you an example, Okotoks if they were looking at the same real-life development that we recently did, they would be charging $1.4 million for securities, whereas the town of High River would have collected $1.4 million in securities. High River would have collected $4.4 million in securities. So a huge difference. So our recommendation is to move that down to 100%, still protects the town, and also leaves more money for the developer so they can invest in our community. The security reduction rates, I took a look at 4 other communities, and basically what we found for the reduction rates, which is we keep 15% of the original value of security. We've had no issues with this. I've talked to a few other developers about this too, and they had no negative comments to say about our reduction rate and our process. So our recommendation moving forward is to have no changes to this section. So basically, just as a quick overview for tiering, administration is recommending not moving ahead with the tiering program. Surety bonds, we highly recommend moving forward with surety bonds, as we had a really positive experience with the last 2 that we've collected. And they also are going to be following the same rules as City of Edmonton, which is basically making sure they're licensed in Canada, licensed in Alberta, and that they have a really good rating. So that's already incorporated into the draft policy as well. The security amounts collected, like I mentioned, we're recommending we go from 150% down to 100% to align with other communities in the area. And for our security reduction rate and process, there's no changes recommended. And there's one more item that I just wanted to cover because it was brought up by a couple developers as part of our stakeholder feedback, and that is paying interest to developers on money being held. So I reached out to a few other communities. There are no other communities that got a hold of me that do this. So essentially what they were looking for is any money being held by the town, any interest that the town would make would be paid back to the developers. There's a lot of forms of security where we don't even cash it. It's just a letter of credit sitting with us, or for a surety bond, it would just basically be sitting in our vault, and it doesn't get cashed, so there is no interest to be paid. There is a couple methods where there is a chance where it would be cashed, but it like logistically talking to finance, it would be really tricky to be paying that, especially if you're dealing with security reductions and then interest rate changes and those kind of things. So we already are doing what other communities do, which is we don't pay interest, and most of the developers are going to be paying through surety bonds anyhow. There's lots of interest in that so far. There's actually another developer just waiting for these meetings to be done so that they can also submit their surety bonds. So I am ready to take on any questions.
We've got about 3 minutes left, Council, before we're going to adjourn this meeting and move into the, just so you know, Halid, this variance application that's coming up after you guys are done this infill variance, let's move it to it's a minor one, so let's move it to the next committee of the whole meeting for discussion. But if you need to do the posting publicly sooner than later, go ahead and do that, because so just to finish off Shlane's piece, it all looks really good, Shlane. Very well done. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
I can't thank you enough, and neither can Clark. So this has been a long time coming to finally deal with this, and I appreciate it so much. But if you guys can put a recommendation motion together for us for the next council meeting, we'll get it dealt with there. That's okay.
Just to be clear, Jody, I think this was going to be added on to this agenda, correct, for today, for this afternoon?
Maybe not. We'll discuss that for a minute.
It depends on council's direction. If council is ready for today, they can make that option, or we can make it for November 25th.
Do you have the recommendation completely ready to roll right now?
We can make sure that is ready to go.
Okay, well then maybe we'll add it then.
Thank you.
So yeah, the variance, let's move it to the next committee of the whole. It's just a single dwelling variance, but we can discuss that at the next committee of the whole meeting. Any quick questions from council to administration? When I say quick, I mean like 15 seconds quick. No? Meeting adjourned 2:44.